The rift grounds on Orion Station 9 were not clean. Dust gathered in the corners, bloodstains never really left the arena floor, and the crowd always made a mess. People came from far colonies to see warriors fight. They came for blood, for fire, and for something to believe in. No one paid attention to the janitor who came in each morning. Greg Turner pushed his cart through the long hallway. His back was slightly bent and his face was quiet. He did not wear armor. He wore a jumpsuit. In his hand was an old mop. He looked like a man who had worked too long and said too little. The young guards at the gate barely noticed him. One even laughed as Greg passed. "Try not to fall asleep in the ring, old man." Greg didn't answer. He just nodded and kept walking. The sounds of the arena grew louder. The crowd cheered for the current match, where a man in silver armor fought against a two-headed alien beast. The fight was fast and violent. Greg stopped by the entrance and waited. He looked at the ring, at the blood on the stone floor, at the fighters. But he wasn't watching the match. He was watching their feet, the way they moved, the space between attacks. The match ended. The man in silver won, raising his fist. The crowd roared. Greg turned and pushed his cart again. He had places to clean, moved toward the storage rooms, past the fighters' quarters, past the broadcast deck. Nobody spoke to him. He liked it that way. But things were not like before. Something had changed on the station. There were new fighters, ones who didn't play by the rules. The new aliens were not just strong. They were smart, brutal, and organized. Rumor said they came from a system that had no laws. They fought not for honor, but for control. Greg heard the whispers. One said a young fighter had been killed before the match even started. Another said one of the aliens attacked a guard off duty. People were afraid, but no one spoke about it on the record. Fear kept mouths closed. He stopped at a water station and poured himself a small drink. His hands were rough, his knuckles thick with old scars. On his wrist was a faded band with numbers almost too faint to read. He stared at them for a moment. Back in the locker room, the noise from the arena echoed. A few fighters sat in silence, some rubbing their arms, some staring at the floor. One of them, a young woman named Rachel, looked up at Greg. "They say you're here every day." Greg nodded. "Ever seen something you couldn't clean up?" He looked at her. Then, with a small smile, he said, "Yes." She didn't ask more. Something about the way he said it made her stop. Greg walked past, his cart squeaking slightly as he moved. In the central command room, an old analyst named Nora watched the live feeds. She noticed something strange. One of the new alien squads had formed a tight group near the fighter entrance. They were not talking, just waiting, too quiet. She leaned forward. "Where's Leo?" "Missing. No check-in." The announcer's voice rang across the arena. "An open challenge has been declared. Any fighter may answer." There was silence. Then a slow sound echoed. A cart rolling on the hard floor. Greg walked forward. The guards looked confused. The crowd started to laugh. He placed the mop against the wall and stepped forward. One of the alien leaders smiled. "You." Greg looked up. "Do you remember Red Sector 12? The alien blinked. Greg stepped into the ring. The doors closed behind him. The crowd went silent. The arena lights dimmed. The crowd still laughed, thinking it was a joke. An old janitor stepping into the ring. It didn't make sense, but Greg didn't stop. He walked to the center and stood tall. His boots left wet marks on the stone floor where his mop had touched. Across from him, the alien leader gave a signal. 3 fighters stepped forward. They were tall, armored, and fast. Their skin was dark green with glowing lines that moved like fire under the surface. Their eyes were cold. They didn't see Greg as a threat. They didn't even draw their full weapons. The first alien rushed him. Greg turned slightly, lowered his center, and moved with calm steps. The alien swung. Greg leaned back just enough, grabbed the alien's arm and twisted. A snap followed. The alien screamed and dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped, then went silent. The second alien didn't wait. He came from the left, holding a blade. Greg moved faster than anyone expected. He caught the alien's wrist, turned, and flipped the attacker over his shoulder. The sound of the impact was loud. Dust rose. The alien didn't move again. The third fighter stopped. He looked at Greg with new eyes, backed up slowly. Greg didn't chase him. He just stood there. In the command room, Nora Jenkins leaned forward. She played the footage again, frame by frame. Greg's form, his steps, his grip, it all looked familiar. She opened a locked file from 20 years ago. Video from the war. Soldier known only by a call sign. Phantom of Red Sector. She froze the frame. Same hands, same stance. Same calm look. It can't be, she whispered. Back in the arena, the crowd started whispering too. The laughter had stopped. Now people looked closer. Some older veterans in the crowd stood up. One of them said, "I've seen that move before." In the Battle of Eurus's prime, the announcer didn't know what to say. He cleared his throat and tried to sound excited. "Well, it seems we have. A surprising turn of events. The janitor, no, the challenger has defeated the first wave." Greg didn't react. He looked at the alien leader, who now frowned. Another signal. 4 more stepped forward. These ones looked stronger, faster. Greg reached back slowly and picked up the mop. He held it like a staff. The crowd stared. First alien lunged with twin blades. Greg stepped aside, spinning the mop in his hands. Struck the alien across the chest, sending him to the ground. Another came from behind. Greg turned, blocked with the mop, then used the end to strike the alien's head. The helmet cracked, the alien dropped. The next 2 came together. Greg moved between them like water. He used their own momentum, hitting their legs and knocking them off balance. They fell. Now the alien leader looked worried. He stepped into the ring. Greg didn't speak. He adjusted his grip. The mop was broken at the top, but it still held firm. The leader circled him, looking for a weakness. He attacked fast, claws out. Greg blocked the first strike, ducked under the second, then spun and hit the leader in the side. The alien grunted. Greg kept moving, each motion faster than the last. They fought for several minutes. Every time the alien attacked, Greg was there, calm, precise, unshaken. Then, one final move. Greg dropped low, swept the alien's legs and pointed the mop at his throat. The leader stopped. The crowd stood up. Then they cheered, not for blood, but for something they had not seen in years. A real fighter, a master. He lowered the mop and walked to the edge of the ring. Nora sent the old war footage to the arena screens. People saw it. A younger Greg, in armor, fighting with a staff. Same calm face, the same stance. Gasps filled the arena. He was not just a janitor. He was the ghost from the past, and he had returned. Greg stood at the edge of the ring while the crowd continued to cheer. His breathing was steady. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just turned, picked up the mop again, and walked away. He left the same way he came, in quiet and unseen by many, but now remembered by all. In the locker room, some fighters stared at him. Others looked down. One of them, a tall man named Kyle, stood up and walked toward him. "Who are you?" Kyle asked. Greg looked at him, then shrugged. "Just a cleaner." Kyle shook his head. "No, not anymore." Greg pushed his cart through the hallway, heading toward the supply room. Behind him, whispers followed. Some people stayed silent, but others started to talk. They wanted to know more about the man with the mop who moved like a soldier. In the command center, Nora watched the reactions across the colonies. The stream was trending. People from Mars Base, Europa City, and the belt stations were commenting. Many sent messages asking about the old footage. Some veterans even started recording their memories of the Phantom of Red Sector. Nora opened a file that had been locked for years. It showed Greg during the war. He had led small missions, fought in tight spaces, used broken tools and whatever he could find to survive. He never spoke much. He never stayed long. He always walked alone after the battle. Now he was back, and people wanted answers. Inside the arena, the alien team met in a dark corner. Their leader, still holding his side from the fight, looked angry. He didn't expect this. The plan had been simple. Show power, break the humans, take control of the rift grounds. But one man had stopped them. He sent a message to his home command. The ghost is alive. Back in the lower halls, Rachel found Greg cleaning the floor near the medbay. "Why did you come back?" she asked. Greg didn't look up. "I never left. It wasn't just a fight. You could have killed them. I didn't need to." I paused. "They'll come again. Stronger." Greg nodded. "Then I'll be here." She looked at him, trying to understand. You don't even have armor. Armor slows me down. She shook her head and walked away, but something in her changed. She wasn't afraid anymore. That night, messages kept coming. Greg's name became a topic on every news channel. Some called him a hero. Others didn't believe it. A few old soldiers confirmed it. One even said, "I saw him turn a tide of war with just a broken pipe in his will." In a hidden room deep under the station, a man in a black coat watched the footage over and over. He zoomed in on Greg's face. "So you're still alive," he whispered. He opened a file marked Cinder Vault. Back in the arena the next day, new names were called. Fighters from other systems arrived. Some came to challenge Greg. Some came to learn from him, but he was not there. He had taken the morning shift. Greg mopped the upper hallway near the solar wing. The place was quiet. Only the sound of the mop sliding on the floor filled the air. But even here, two young fighters stopped when they saw him. "Sir," one of them said, unsure why he used that word. Greg looked at them. "Keep your feet light. Never look at your hands during a fight. Always watch their eyes." The boys stood straight. They listened. Greg kept walking. Later that evening, Nora found him near the storage deck. "They want you to speak. Publicly." Greg shook his head. "No need. People need hope." He looked at her and let them find it in each other. "I just cleaned up a mess." But deep down, Greg knew this wasn't over. The arena was awake. Old shadows were moving again. The lights of Orion Station 9 flickered as more ships arrived. Fighters, reporters, and observers came from across the colonies. The story of the old man with the mop had spread far. Everyone wanted to see the legend in action. Everyone wanted to know if it was real. But Greg stayed away from the arena, did not speak to the cameras. He did not join the interviews. He kept cleaning. Halls, med bays, training rooms, nothing changed for him. People stared as he passed. Some nodded. Others gave him space. Few asked for advice. He gave short answers, but never bragged. His silence made the story stronger. Rachel trained harder now. She had watched Greg closely. She changed the way she stood, the way she moved. She even used a broken stick in her practice fights. Her trainer didn't understand at first, but then others started copying her. The way Greg fought was spreading and no one was teaching it. People were just watching and learning. Nora spent her days digging through records. She found more clips, more reports, and more whispers about Greg's past. Stories from soldiers who had no names, just scars and numbers. All of them spoke about a fighter who showed up, won battles, and disappeared. One night, she visited him near the waste units. "You led a team through the burning towers of Vexor City, didn't you?" Greg didn't stop mopping. "That was a long time ago. You saved 23 people from a collapsed base on Eurus Prime." He looked at her. "Only remember the ones we lost. Why won't you tell your story?" Greg leaned on the mop. "Because I'm not the story." At the same time, in a dark part of the station, the alien team gathered. Their leader had recovered. His pride was not. He slammed his claw into the wall. "Should be dead." One of the others replied, "He wasn't listed in any record. We thought he was gone. He's not gone. It's a threat." They planned their next move. This time, it would not be a challenge. This time, they would find Greg when no one was watching. The following day, Greg walked through the south corridor. He noticed the silence. Usually there were guards, crew, or fighters, but now, nothing. He stopped, looked behind him, and waited. From the shadows, 3 figures stepped out. They wore dark armor, no marks, no flags. "You don't belong here," one said. Greg didn't answer. He looked at the floor, then at the walls. No cameras, no witnesses. The arena isn't safe for your kind. Greg placed his mop down slowly. His eyes stayed calm. The first attacker rushed. Greg moved to the side, grabbed the arm, twisted, and dropped the man. The second came fast, swinging a heavy stick. Greg blocked with the mop's handle, then struck low. The attacker fell. The third pulled a blade. Greg stepped in, closed the space, and hit the attacker with his elbow. The blade dropped. Greg kicked it away. All 3 were on the ground, groaning. Greg picked up the mop again and kept walking. Later, Nora reviewed a silent alert from that hallway. It showed no video, but the door logs told the story. She sighed. They're testing him. That evening, Rachel walked with Greg near the training rooms. "You knew they'd come for you," Greg nodded. They don't like what they can't control. Why didn't you call for help? He looked at her. Because one day, they'll come for you too, and you need to be ready. She understood. In the main arena, preparations began for the next event. A new group of fighters arrived. Their ship carried a symbol from the outer edge, the kind of group that didn't follow rules. The announcer spoke into the mic. A new challenger rises. Unknown origin. High skill. The arena is watching. Greg listened from the hallway. He leaned on his mop and stared at the screen. He knew the look in their eyes. He had seen it long ago, and he knew this was just the beginning. The arena was full. People stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the next match. The lights dimmed. The screens flickered. A new name appeared on the display. No one had seen it before. No background, no records, just a name. Ghostblade. The crowd grew quiet. The doors opened. Tall figure stepped into the arena. Dark armor, smooth helmet, no face, no voice. Just silence. The fighter stood in the center of the ring. On the other side, the announcer waited for someone to answer the challenge. But no fighter moved. Some looked around, others stayed seated. Everyone remembered what had happened the last time a nameless figure showed up. Then slowly the crowd turned. A single man walked through the hallway. Greg. He wore his jumpsuit. His mop rested across his shoulders, moved at his own pace. Calm, focused. When he stepped into the ring, the crowd didn't cheer. They just watched. Silence was louder than noise. Greg stood across from Ghostblade. The air felt heavy. No one spoke. Then the bell rang. The masked fighter rushed forward, striking fast. Greg blocked the first hit with the mop's handle, stepped aside, and moved behind the attacker. He hit once. The masked fighter turned fast, answering with a low kick. Greg jumped back. They moved like shadows, quick, precise. No wasted steps. The crowd leaned forward, afraid to blink. Ghostblade pulled two thin blades from his sides. Greg narrowed his eyes. He spun the mop, blocking both weapons with perfect timing. He moved around the arena, always just out of reach. But the masked fighter was learning. Every move Greg made, Ghostblade copied and adjusted. The fight grew harder. Greg's hands tightened. He remembered a time when fights like this were common. Back then, every battle had a reason. It was just for control. Ghostblade lunged. Greg dropped low, sweeping the mop toward the fighter's legs. But this time, Ghostblade jumped. The kick struck Greg's chest. He fell back. The crowd gasped. Greg hit the ground and rolled. He stood quickly, breathing hard. His lip bled. He wiped it with his sleeve. He looked at Ghostblade. You're not here to win. You're here to end me. The fighter didn't answer, just attacked. Greg dodged and hit back, but slower now. He felt the pain in his shoulder, the old injuries, the years. Ghostblade struck again. Greg blocked, but the force knocked the mop from his hands. It slid across the floor. The masked fighter pointed both blades at him. Greg looked at the mop, then at the fighter, who raised his fists. The crowd stood. Ghostblade ran forward. Greg caught one wrist, twisted, and turned his whole body. He slammed the fighter to the ground. The blades fell. Greg picked one up. He didn't swing. He placed the blade at Ghostblade's chest. The fighter reached up and removed the helmet. It was a young man. Eyes full of hate, Greg looked at him. You don't even know why you're fighting? The young man didn't answer. Greg stood up, dropped the blade, and walked away. The crowd began to clap, then cheer, then shout his name. Back in the control room, Nora looked at the screen. She smiled. Then she opened a broadcast channel to all colonies. She played the footage, every move, every word. People watched. Across every station, people stood in front of their screens. Veterans saluted. Kids copied the stances. Fighters whispered his name. In the training room later, Rachel met him. You won. Greg shook his head. No, I showed him a choice. Will he take it? That's not up to me. Rachel nodded. What now? Greg picked up his mop. Now I clean. As he walked down the hallway, workers, fighters, and officers stepped aside. Some smiled, some nodded. No one laughed anymore. The mop tapped softly on the floor. And somewhere deep in the station's heart, the legend grew. The master had returned. But he never wanted a throne. He just wanted peace.